This is Mrs. Johnson, and I want to read to you Cezanne's Parrot by Amy Guillermo, illustrated by Brett Hulquist. In the French countryside, near blooming lavender fields, in a little yellow house, lived an artist named Paul Cezanne, and his new parrot, Bisou. "Bonjour, Bisou," Cezanne said as he fed the bird a grape. "Can you say, 'Cezanne is a great painter'?" he asked, hoping someday someone would tell him it was true. But the bird just plucked at his feathers and said nothing. For years, Cezanne had struggled as an artist in Paris. While other artists painted portraits of aristocrats and grand scenes from history and mythology, Cezanne depicted ordinary people in everyday places. While other artists painted flawless details with tiny brushes and delicate strokes, Cezanne preferred thick paint and heavy marks. So when Cezanne submitted his portfolio to the famous Académie des Beaux-Arts, where most talented students from around the world studied, the professors scoffed. "This is too black. That is too flat. These are rough and unfinished." Cezanne fumed. "My hair is longer than my talent." But his friend Monet offered some advice. "Go to the country and paint what you see." And so Cezanne packed his supplies and journeyed south with Bisou, determined to become a truly great painter. With a fresh canvas in hand, Cezanne wandered through fragrant meadows until he found the perfect view of trees stretched toward the sun. While Monet could paint quickly, finishing a painting in a single day, Cezanne was painstakingly slow. For many weeks he toiled away on the same canvas, carefully choosing each dab of pigment and measuring each brushstroke. It took over 100 visits to his special hilltop to finish that one scene. And every evening upon his return, the artist presented the parrot with his latest work. "Repeat after me," he said as he passed the bird a plum. "Cezanne is a great painter." Bisou opened his beak as if to speak, but he just yawned instead. For months, Cezanne labored over just a few paintings. Some took years to complete, some remained unfinished, and some were hurled into the fire. After much consideration, Cezanne chose his best pieces and returned to Paris to apply to the Salon, the official art show of the Académie. When Cezanne toured the school, he thought all the students looked the same. Everyone was imitating the famous artist who came before them. But Cezanne didn't care about tradition. He didn't want to follow the rules. He wanted to do something new. The professors balked when they reviewed his submissions. "Too dark, too crude, too much paint." Cezanne was devastated. "I lack the magnificent richness of color that animates nature," he complained. "Use brighter colors," his friend Pissarro suggested. And so Cezanne returned to the country with his parrot, eager to make his paintings come alive with color. He convinced a friend to be his model and instructed him not to move. When the man sneezed, Cezanne had a fit. "Sit still," he said. "Be an apple." The man posed for hours until the sun disappeared and he snored in his chair. He sat for a single portrait over 150 times until one day he didn't come back. And each night, after a long day's work, the artist danced towards Bisou's perch and presented his progress. "Say, Cezanne is a great painter," he begged as he handed Bisou a fig. But the vibrant parrot only fluffed his feathered chest and coughed. "Forget it! Forget it!" One day, Cezanne received an invitation from his friends in Paris to be in an exhibition with a new group of painters called the Impressionists. Like Cezanne, the Impressionists used loose brush strokes and daubs of pigment to portray scenes of ordinary people and places. And like Cezanne, the Impressionists also had been rejected by the Academy. On opening night, people packed the gallery and raved about the art of the Impressionists. Still, Cezanne's work was different. His friends wanted to capture the color and light of a single moment in time. But Cezanne didn't care about painting things exactly how they looked. Even among a group of rebels, Cezanne did not fit in. When the crowd noticed Cezanne's unusual style, they roared with laughter. "Ugly! Dismal! Sloppy!" Cezanne poked holes in his canvases and broke his brushes. Luckily, his friend Renoir saved a small watercolor. How does he do it? Renoir marveled. Monet agreed, but Cezanne snapped. You two are making fun of me. When Cezanne returned home, he decided to ignore the critics and paint what he wanted, how he wanted. He knew people might laugh or say his style was ugly. After all, he was painting in a way no one else had done before. Cezanne set out a vase of flowers and dipped his brush into a vivid pigments on his palette. But he worked so slowly that after days of toiling, the flowers drooped and lost their petals. One morning, before Cezanne could say hello, Bisou greeted him with a squawk. Bonjour! Now, Cezanne is a great painter, the artist said excitedly as he fed the bird a peach. Bisou just blinked. Cezanne groaned and arranged a napkin and a dish of fruit on his studio table. The artist worked tirelessly, days into nights, only taking breaks to eat and sleep. Then, one day, as Cezanne stepped back to admire his finished work, his friend Gauguin dropped in to see his recent pieces. When Cezanne revealed the fresh still life, he heard a commotion coming from Bisou's cage. Cezanne opened the door to hand Bisou a pear, but the lively parrot flew from the cage and landed on the easel. Bisou whistled, his carmine plumes standing up like a crown. Cezanne is a great painter. Gauguin agreed. He loved the painting so much, he bought it. The artist laughed and handed Bisou an apple. Then he scattered the remaining fruit across the table. Ah! Exclaimed Cezanne as he envisioned a masterpiece. The artist dabbed scarlet onto a fresh canvas. He scraped, slashed, and slapped at the paint with a knife, smiling. I will astonish Paris with an apple, he declared. And he did. Cezanne is a great painter. The artist Paul Cezanne really did have a pet parrot that he taught to say Cezanne is a great painter. Why would he do such a thing? He probably needed the encouragement. Although he painted his entire life, Cezanne struggled for recognition throughout his long career, achieving success only toward the end of his life. Born in Aix-en-Provence, France in 1839, Cezanne developed artistic aspirations at a young age. In the 1860s, he moved to Paris, a city filled with literary and artistic activity, to study painting. He applied to the Académie des Beaux-Arts in 1861, but was denied entry. Subsequently, the Salon and the official art exhibit of the Académie rejected Cezanne's submissions every year from 1864 to 1869. While in Paris, Cezanne was highly influenced by a group of painters called the Impressionists, including his mentor, artist Camille Pissarro. Pissarro encouraged Cezanne to paint outside, in plein air, like other young artists of the time, rather than sitting in a studio. And so, after years of rejection from collectors and critics in Paris, Cezanne moved to the French countryside to paint in solitude. In 1874, Cezanne returned to Paris to participate in the premiere exposition of the Impressionist artist. His work was badly received by critics and the public, so he skipped the second exhibition. He did submit to the third exhibition in 1877, but once again his work was panned. Cezanne did not feel his style meshed with the Impressionists, so he parted ways with his friends. Indeed, historians now describe Cezanne as a post-Impressionist, indicating that his work belongs in the subsequent movement of artistic inquiry. Unlike his contemporaries, who focused on landscapes, Cezanne turned his interest toward the still life genre of painting, focusing on arrangements of fruits, flowers, and everyday objects. Cezanne spent so much time on each painting that the fruit would spoil, so he would have to use wax models. He really did say, I will astonish Paris with an apple, and today he is the best known for his still lifes of fruit. Eventually, in 1895, at the age of 56, Cezanne gained interest from a gallery in Paris that agreed to show 150 of his canvases, including several still lifes of apples. The show was a smashing success. Every last painting sold, even when they raised the prices. The exhibition was such a sensation, the gallery owner traveled to the countryside in 1899 and bought everything in Cezanne's studio. What changed? Throughout his life, Cezanne experimented with his technique with varying success, and over the years his style evolved and matured. Finally, at the end of the 19th century, That experimentation paid off, and his innovation and contribution to art was recognized and celebrated. His work was seen as fresh and modern, and young painters traveled to Aix-en-Provence to seek his guidance. Cezanne was so obsessed with his work he often stopped only to eat, sleep, and attend church. He even missed his own mother's funeral in order to paint. For portraits he famously made his models pose for hours at a time, sometimes for over 150 sessions. Cezanne pledged to paint until the day he died, and he did. In 1906 he caught pneumonia when he was painting outside in a storm and died 3 days later. Today, Cezanne's paintings are considered masterpieces and are some of the most expensive works of art ever sold. Cezanne is now known as the father of modern art, and his work was influenced by many other famous painters like Paul Gauguin, Pablo Picasso, and Henri Matisse. Picasso, considered by many to be the greatest artist of the 20th century, said, "My one and only master, Cezanne, was like a father of us all." Cezanne is a great painter.